First, a little bit about school home support. So we work in partnership with schools, from the school out to the home, and we work with vulnerable children and families who find stuff that gets in the way of the kids accessing their education. When I first started my first year in 2005, before I'd arrived, they'd arranged that we spoke at each of the party conferences that year. And I was delighted to share a platform with Beverly. And the room was packed, and it was a really vibrant discussion about how you really involve parents and school and get that match together. And it was at a time when lots of exciting things were happening for children, and it was really great to be part of that. Out of it came things like the parent support advisors, which were in schools across the country. Unfortunately, the last 2 years we've seen actually the decimation of a lot of those support services there. We're still trying to make it happen, and we're trying to provide support and training for those practitioners who have been left fairly isolated. I also went to the Conservative Party conference that year, and I was sharing a platform with Theresa May. I was quite interested and excited about that. She definitely did have flash kitten heels on. But the room was empty because it coincided with the Conservative Party leadership elections. And the hustings that morning, that time of our session, Ken Clark was doing his bit. So we had one man in a Daily Mail and lots of comments about women staying at home with their children, please. So it was a bit of a different experience. Anyway, I'm going to talk today about the journey of poor attendance and what impact it has on children's lives, and the ability of education really being the ticket to improve life chances, but how, sadly, if you're poor, you're unlikely to fulfil all of your potential there. I was at a conference last week, and someone from the Russell Group was speaking. Apparently, in 2009, only 232 children of all the children in state schools achieved 3 A-levels, 3 A's at A-level, sorry. And you know, that's a real quite shocking what goes on there, and you can see why some of those imbalances at higher education happens. Our data at School Home Support, we last year worked with 15,000 children and young people and their families, making about 80,000 interventions in there. And when we took a cut of what happens to those children who were classed by our practitioners as in poverty, we found that they were 5 times more likely to be living in a house where domestic violence was happening, and 7 times more likely to have drug and alcohol abuse as an issue. More than a quarter of them had issues around mental health, and 43% had issues around family breakdown and family relationship problems. More than a fifth had child protection and safeguarding issues. Now, for most of those children, most of those things were happening before they got to school. However, it isn't until children are legal 5, the term after their 5th birthday, that they have to go to school. But once they're there, their attendance is constantly monitored, and those that sit below, it was 80%, and now it's 85% attendance, are categorised as persistently absent. And from an educational point of view, the reason for monitoring attendance is really obvious. Oh, this isn't happening. I'm doing Robert's. Sorry. You can be, let me know. Okay, you missed all my pretty slides. So from an educational point of view, the reasons for monitoring attendance is obvious, and there's a direct correlation between poor attendance and poor attainment, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with these figures. Only 3% of children who miss more than 50% of school get their 5 A to C's at GCSE, with maths and English. And those who miss between half a day and a day a week, only 35% of those achieve 5 A to C's. Whereas those who attend for miss less than 5% of their time, they achieve 73% of those achieve their 5 A to Cs. So from society's point of view, there are many other reasons to worry about school attendance. There's the link between poor attainment at 16 and lack of opportunities after compulsory education. Young people who are persistently absent during the last year of school are 4 times more likely not to be in education, employment or training at 18 as their peers. So they won't be earning, they won't be paying tax and national insurance. In fact, they will be costing the taxpayer money. And by the way, those who do find work are twice likely to be only on the minimum wage. And if you're poor and persistently absent from school, you're 3 times more likely to come from a household where none of the principal adults are at work. Those young people who are persistently absent from school are 4 times more likely to have a fixed-term exclusion and 26 times more likely to be permanently excluded. And once that happens, it all gets much worse. A study by the HM Prisons Inspectorate and the Youth Justice Board in 2009-10 found that 70% of 15 to 18-year-olds in custody are truancy from school. 40% of newly sentenced prisoners said they'd been permanently excluded, and 46% left school with no qualifications. Now, paying to keep people in young offence establishment in prison is really expensive. For not much of the top-up, you can send them all to Eton. Not that we'd want to. But for a young offenders unit, it costs £60,000 a year to keep young people there. And if you send them to a secure training unit, for every 2 sent there, 5 could go to Eton. It's clear that being a poor attender at school is not good for your life chances. But the thing is, persistent absence is so much more than truancy. The word truancy reminds us of bunking off for a day or 2. Persistent absenteeism is more complicated than this, with much longer-term implications. It can destroy lives of families and damage wider society. And it's also much more complicated to deal with properly and in depth. New Philanthropy Capital, an organisation that specialises in measuring results of charities, defined poor attendance in a report they did, Schools Out. They said, truancy is not just about skipping school because of rebellion, boredom or lack of interest in lessons, although these can be major reasons for truant. In the majority of persistent cases, the causes are more complex. Parentally condoned absence is a major cause of non-attendance. And this type of absence is extremely hard to tackle, as targeting the child in isolation is unlikely to be effective. Because fear of angering parents is a major factor in preventing most children from truancy, and it demonstrates the importance of a parent's attitude to their child's attendance and behaviour at school. And just as there are many reasons why a child truants, there are many reasons why parents might condone their children's absence from school. We'll all know examples, the parents who depend on their children for emotional or practical support during the day, and those who are just so overwhelmed with everything else that they have to deal with that they just don't give priority in getting the children up ready to school on time and regularly. And occasionally, there are those who just don't see school as important. In England, in 2010-11, out of a state-funded school population of just under 6.4 million, nearly 1 in 16 missed 15% of their schooling. That's 400,000 children missing almost a day a week, and many of those miss much more. And the correlation between being poor and being a poor attender is strong. Of the children who are persistently absent, 40% qualify for a free school meal. They live in a household where the income is less than £16,000 a year. And they're 3 times more likely to have economically inactive parents. And many of the factors that get in the way of children being in school, ready to learn, stem from the home. So leaving the problem to the teachers to deal with isn't reasonable. Targeting support for children entitled to a free school meal via the pupil premium is a great opportunity to make an impact in this crucial area, because it doesn't matter how good and engaging the teaching is, if the children aren't in school, they're not going to benefit from it. So reviewing what systems are in place to support children getting to school ready to learn is a very effective way of ensuring that the most vulnerable of children are able to take up opportunities education gives them to break the cycle of intergenerational poor attendance, poor attainment and poor employment prospects. But to do that, you have to be prepared to go out of the school to the home. You have to build a relationship of trust with some very vulnerable families, and especially with the adults. You then have to help them tackle the underlying issues that cause poor attendance, poor behaviour and poor attainment. You may need to support them with their housing, with bereavement, with immigration status, with domestic violence or relationship breakdown issues, with low mental health or indeed their physical health. And sometimes it might be a simple thing that can help. Buying a washing machine and a couple of spare school shirts for a family where children don't go to school after Wednesday because they're dirty and they smell is a very simple way of supporting them. And if a young person always misses school on a particular day, it's important to find out what happens on that day. It might be that that's the day they have PE, and rather than not admitting to not having a pair of trainers, they just don't turn up. And whatever you think about missing PE, fact is they'll miss other key subjects as well. And so they may have trouble catching up. And so rather than being seen to be behind the school, they stop coming. They miss even more. So if you've got access to a hardship fund or a welfare fund, buying a pair of trainers is a great investment in that young person's education. And for many families, there will be more than one issue, and they may well find the prospect of trying to negotiate with the different silos of provision overwhelming. The children and family need an advocate. They may need a mediator with the school. They're also likely to need some basic problem solving and their confidence building. I want to illustrate this with a story of a family who we've been supporting. Actually, I'll start from the practitioner. Sally is a practitioner at primary school, and Kay's children attend there. Kay's a single parent, and when Sally first came across Kay, the children's attendance was erratic, and Kay was considered difficult. She could be loud and aggressive, often shouting and swearing in reception, and with grievances towards the school because she felt that they weren't dealing with her children's difficulties, and particularly her children's dyslexia. So the school asked Sally to intervene, so she had a word with Kay and invited her to have a coffee. And somewhat reluctantly, she agreed. Sally explained her role, and Kay opened up about her life. She was struggling. She had been brought up in care herself and had no family to support her. The children's father wasn't on the scene, and she was finding parenting a real challenge. She was ashamed of herself, as she felt she couldn't help her children with their schoolwork because she struggled with literacy. She constantly referred to herself as stupid, and she decided that she'd never be able to get a job. A whole lot more came out of that first conversation, including the fact that the children were sleeping on the settee because Sally couldn't afford beds for them. As Kay was preparing to leave at the end of their first meeting, she said to Sally, "Thank you. No one has ever listened to me properly before." They're going to meet regularly. School home support has a welfare fund, so we were able quite quickly to sort out the beds issue, and that thing starts to build a deeper level of trust. But we also helped Sally by arranging for her to go on a dyslexia course for parents. And it came out later on that she was really quite interested in working with children, and so we found her a childcare course to attend and arranged for her to also receive additional literacy support. Importantly, Sally made sure that the school knew the efforts that Kay was making. She broke the relationship between Kay and the school. Kay's children joined the homework club, and Kay started doing some volunteering in the school. She completed her childcare course and went on to do a first aid course. Her confidence has increased dramatically, and she's now applying for a job in the local nursery. She's much more positive about her own abilities and her ability to support her children with their learning. The school no longer has an issue with the children's attendance, and they have one less aggressive parent. Now that takes some time, it takes some investment, but the difference it will make, not only to Kay's life, but to her children's life, and indeed to their children's lives, will be enormous. Governors at a secondary school were hearing about the work of Dammy, one of the school home support practitioners. They heard about a boy who'd been absent from school for 5 weeks. Dammy was relatively new to the school and had arranged a home visit. So when she got there, Mum was really surprised that the child wasn't at school, because she sent him off every day and said goodbye and he went to school. It transpired that he had gone to school every day, but as soon as he got there, he was locking himself in the lavatories. He was being bullied and threatened, and he just didn't go out. He didn't have anybody to tell. Joseph, another child, lived a bus ride away from school. He had twice been stabbed near his home. He'd missed school whilst in hospital. After the second time, he didn't come back. Dammy went to his home, and what she found really concerned her. He lived in one room with his 2-year-old brother and his mother, who was heavily pregnant. The story unfolded. She was here illegally. She had spent nearly everything she'd had on poor immigration lawyers, and she had no recourse to funds. She was in debt and behind with her rent, so she was frightened to leave the flat in case the landlord disposed of her belongings. She hadn't had any contact with the health service because she couldn't pay, and this was clearly going to be a long-term case. In the meantime, Dammy arranged for the school to provide a taxi to help Joseph every day until he was fit and able to get back himself. He was delighted to be back at school. It was a place that was a safe and normal place for him, unlike his home. He worked incredibly hard and his attendance was fantastic. He did very well. But as Steve Gillett, an assistant head at another school, said powerfully, that if he hadn't had those interventions, children like this literally become ghosts lost in the system. Schools are great places and really change children's life chances. And because there's no stigma attached to being in school, they're great places to coordinate access to universal services and targeted services for vulnerable children and families. Teachers can't do this. They don't have the time. Expert practice does do this, making a huge difference to getting children in school ready to learn and breaking that intergenerational cycle. School Home Support's track record demonstrates this, and I hope you'll take the time to talk to colleagues here during the day. Thank you very much for listening. For more information, the stall's over there, and there are several colleagues here today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and with the thoughts and strategies to ensure that every child gets the support they need to thrive and achieve. Good morning.